Do you enjoy westerns involving mysterious gunslingers, seedy saloons, crooked railroad barons, and justice being dispensed at the end of a pistol rather than a gavel? Then I highly recommend for you Razorfist and George Alexopoulos' Ghosts of the Badlands. Canyon Diablo, Arizona Territory, 1896. A town tougher than Tombstone, deadlier than Deadwood, where rival railroad companies vie for control and bandits murder at whim. But something stirs in the Sonoran wasteland. A masked rider wielding a bizarre mechanical pistol of the old world, dispensing the justice of the Old Testament. Beware the ghost of the Badlands. I have to admit that my review of this book is actually quite overdue, as I ended up purchasing this back on the original Indiegogo campaign when it came out, and my version is the limited edition with several extras beyond the story itself. I put it on my shelf. As you can see behind me, I have a ton of books, and I meant to read it, and sadly, it fell by the wayside. However, yesterday, I decided to pick it up and read it, and I didn't expect this, but I actually finished it in an afternoon. I just could not put it down until I completed the entire story. So what is the story, you ask? Well, it starts off with a very exciting hook involving a man named Redstone, who is being gunned down by a gang of bandits who are looking to kill him for reasons that you will soon find out later on in the story. He is saved by a mysterious masked rider who is known throughout the area as the Ghost. And after he's saved, the Ghost gives him two choices. Either he can take his lost limb as penance for his sins of the past, or he can pick himself up and ride out to a saloon in two guns and pick up a new mission there and find new purpose from the Ghost himself. So if this sounds like a strong hook, it really is. And the opening to the story in just a few pages immediately makes you want to continue and find out more. What's Redstone's past that would make him be in a position where he deserves the punishment of being gunned down, since it looked like he was an innocent man saving a family? What are the Ghost's motivations, and what is this mission that he will get? How is he going to accomplish these goals, and how is a story that has such a wide scope from the initial intro able to conclude itself in a meaningful way in only a little over 100 pages? They're able to conclude all of this through expert storytelling that is done fantastically with Razorfist's prose that fit the period well, and also through George Alexopoulos' artwork. His artwork is expressive and emotive and fiery, almost as fiery as his opinion on AI image generation, and no, I will not call it art. And that's a compliment to George as well. But his art sets the stage to be able to conclude this story and really stick the landing. Again, this story is able to take all of those big premises I told you about, conclude them meaningfully in this one story, while also leaving plenty of room in the future to be able to expand upon this universe. And that's something I have a great deal of respect for Razorfist for doing. I myself write short fiction. I write fiction that is in a similar vein, in that it is quick pulp stories that are meant to be consumed, conclude, and then leave room for more in the future. You can easily see with this book that he is able to execute that well, and I'm excited to see that there's more people with a following as big as his doing fiction that is not necessarily serialized, but conclusive. And that's something that really hits home with me, because I live and breathe in that same space. And so seeing a bigger creator doing that is great to see, because I think it will open up the audience's eyes to be able to accept and access more content that is not serialized or soap opera storytelling that is meant to go on forever and be, this ambiguous large amoeba that never ends. It's nice to know that it has enough mystery and intrigue to continue, but if he never did make another, this story stands on its own 2 feet quite steadily. So that's great. And with all of that being said, I wanted to mention that you can see the pulp influences that he has. Stories like Pale Rider that have the desert western feel Also, from an actual narrative aspect, one thing he had mentioned was The Dark Valley, which is an Austrian Western film. And the story has some parallels to this one. And it is really cool to see how he pulled the homages from those inspirations and the way that he told this story without simply just copying and pasting. It truly feels like his own voice is being represented in a genre that he clearly loves. A bit of a spoiler warning here, but it's something that I really wanted to share because I thought that they did such a fantastic job. In this story, as I mentioned before, you have Redstone, and he's given a mission from the ghost. And you don't quite understand why Redstone would deserve punishment. And you end up having a flashback that explains why he is actually deserving of said punishment and who he truly is as a person before he found redemption and before he took on the Christian values that the ghost is wanting to impart with the cross that he gives him. And this moment in the story is told very well. I'm not sure exactly how the black and white version does it. I'm sure it does it just as well. But the way that they told the story, that flashback portion, is done very well because it's not easy to give a flashback in a book that feels meaningful and is also placed in that perfect spot where it has the most impact and you realize, wow, this is why this occurred. And when I read it, I was fascinated and I really tried to study the way that they were able to accomplish this because I think it's a really difficult feat. And that's another thing with the art is that the way that George Alexopoulos utilizes emotion, motion, and anatomy, it has the exciting, expressive, and emotive nature that you would expect from graphic fiction. It's got sort of moments of over-the-top expression from the characters, but it isn't afraid to be grounded and feel believable and like you could live in that place. I'm sure anyone who's a fan of Westerns knows the actual setting that the story takes place in needs to feel like a character in and of itself, whether it's the oppressive heat of the Arizona desert, whether you maybe have like snow-backed mountains and people hunkering down in caves. The setting needs to feel like a character. And in this Canyon Diablo setting story, it truly does. And in the back of my book, there's even a map of the area, which is really cool to see. But that's something that I think he did a really good job with. And I know that he had traveled to Arizona to actually study the desert and the different things he would do. And those studies truly show themselves in the artwork that is featured in this volume, whether you're in the color or black and white. You truly feel like you're in the Arizona desert, and every moment and scenery-scape really presents itself authentically. And it's cool to see, as it would have been very easy for George to rely more on his strong character artwork and not necessarily create as big and sweeping of scenery as he did in this. I think that this was a really impressive way for him to stretch his legs and show his artwork beyond the exciting characters that you normally see in many of his posted cartoons online. And one final thing about the artwork is that one thing people don't quite understand, and I'll show you here, is that when you have artwork in a comic book like this, you need to be able to show the right kind of motion, like where people stand when the scene zooms in and zooms out. And I wanted you to be able to see here how they're able to do that. The moments where George decides to zoom in, the moments where George decides to get closer, utilize the scenery, or utilize the actual moments where people are taking action. This is a great example here. The way the glass is being held, the way you zoom in on the cross of the desk clerk there. There's so many moments where he does an expert job at being able to show the physical motion so that when you read this comic, you aren't feeling like you're just reading or looking at visual panels. You're watching a movie play. And that is the sign of a great comic book, is that when you read it, it feels like a movie is playing right in front of your eyes, and your mind mistakes these still panels and creates motion that is not there. And that is a huge kudos to the script that he wrote and to the art and the way it was drawn. Now, I want to dive into my review of the prose themselves, because that's just as important in a Western. You need dialogue that feels authentic to the period, but that doesn't come across as hokey or annoying, too many like utterances of the word varmint or something. And I will say that, again, Razorfist does a great job at utilizing his strong linguistic skills and wide vocabulary to be able to present dialogue that feels authentic and purposeful while not immersion breaking. I read his other one of his other books, The Long Moonlight, and that book tended to be a little more flowery and a little more, for lack of a better word, kind of the mysterious gothic-y prose that would sort of bracket a dark medieval fantasy. And in this story, he is able to adjust his prose to be able to match the style and tone that would envelop the Western genre and the characters and the way that they speak. And I thought that it was really cool to see Razorfist move from one genre to another and adjust his writing to match, and also adjust his writing in a way that works for comic books. You don't need massive blocks of dialogue in comic books if you are able to execute the panels correctly. Now, don't get me wrong, there are times when you need to explain things, but I think a lot of times I've noticed currently in comic books, there is so much dialogue and not enough focus on allowing the story to be told visually. And I think that they did a great job at focusing on the strengths of what a comic book or graphic novel could be, rather than just trying to tell a story but with pictures. The next thing that I wanted to touch on was the way that this volume is presented. This is an oversized hardcover, and as far as I'm aware, if you buy any of the versions, they should be large and oversized. I have not personally seen the paperbacks. I've only seen the hardcovers. But I know that currently you can still buy any of these books in multiple ways. If you want an e-copy, they have it on Amazon. I know that you can get hardback and paperback on Amazon. And if you're interested in the color version, there is a version that is on Walmart.com that is $34.99 that has a red cover, and I believe that is the color version. I could be wrong. Somebody may point it out in the comments section. But overall, you can find this book if you want to get it for as much as $35 and as little as $10. I believe the ebook is $10, the paperback is $15, $30 for the hardcover black and white, and then $35 for the mysterious Walmart version that may or may not be color. So yeah, there are your ways to go track it down. And again, as far as this volume goes, what I wanted to say ultimately is that he is a big fan of bande dessinée, which are French comics. And I personally have gone to comic book shops in Paris and purchased French bande dessinée, and not just French bande dessinée, but French Western bande dessinée. In fact, this is one that I believe he had recommended. And so as someone who has been into those stores and has seen how those books are produced and presented, I would have no qualms about setting the quality of this printing on the shelf next to any bande dessinée in the Western section. And who knows, maybe with his connections one day, he could get a French translation that is on those bande dessinée shelves, because as someone who has shopped in those stores, I can tell you it is an experience unlike any other when it comes to shopping for comic books. There really is nothing that can compare to it. Even large manga shops, while they are quite robust, the French comic scene, unless you have been there and in the store and experienced what they truly have, it's mind-blowing. It's like going into any fiction section in Barnes & Noble and being able to shop all these different genres, but they're all comic books. It's wild. Again, I won't dive too much into that because it's a bit of an aside, but I just wanted to compliment them and give them kudos and a tip of the cap on creating a high-quality piece of material that, in my opinion, at least from this deluxe version, would have, would not look out of place on a shelf like that. And if you do find this deluxe edition, like on eBay or something, there are a lot of extras in it. Again, I had mentioned earlier that there is a map of Cain and Diablo in the back of the book. There are also several other extras, including the early pencils, the early script, a bunch of the early drawings for concept that Razorfist had. So if you do want to pay for that version on eBay or somebody selling a used version, you will not be disappointed at what you get. It is very impressive, the level of extras they added to it. Again, this book as a comic is only, a few hundred pages, but with the extras, it is, much, much thicker and much more robust. So if this sounds like an interesting story to you, and I assure you it is, then I recommend you saddle up to your nearest keyboard, get online, jump on Amazon or Walmart.com, and get yourself a copy of Razorfist and George Alexopoulos' Ghost of the Badlands.